Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe, comment, like, all of that. My name is Inswain with Inswain Audio. I got a special one for you today. Lil Uzi Vert vocal tutorial, specifically on the song EXO Tour Life, but it's kind of his signature sound. So this might work for your song or a song similar to Lil Uzi to get that modern trap sound. Yeah, without further ado, let's jump into this. So what I'll do is first I'll play you the original song and we can hear that. So let me do that real quick.
I don't really care if you cry. I don't really shouldn't ever lie. Should've saw the way she looked me in my eyes. She said, baby, I am not afraid.
Okay, so we're probably familiar with that song. That's the sound. What sticks out to me, heavy auto-tune, very thin vocal, echoes. And now let's hear what I did.
I don't really care if you cry. I don't really shouldn't ever lie. Should've saw the way she looked me in my eyes. She said, baby, I am not afraid to.
So you hear right there, I got the same mix. I was able to find the raw vocals online and mix them to how the original song was. So now what I'll do is I'll play them both and A-B them back and forth so you can hear the similarities.
I don't really care if you cry. I don't really shouldn't ever lie. Should've saw the way she looked me in my eyes. She said, baby, I'm not afraid to.
Alright, so there you have it. So now what I'll do is I'll play it to you completely raw, how I started, with no effects on it, no processing, so you can hear what I started with.
I don't really care if you cry. I don't really shouldn't ever lie. Should've saw the way she looked me in my eyes. She said, baby, I am not afraid to.
Alright, let's start adding these plugins in one by one and we can hear what I did in the order, and I'll show you the settings I used to get that sound. So the first thing that I used, and I do this a lot for rap vocals, the first two plugins I'll do is I'll do an NLS channel from Waves. And basically I'm just doing this because it is an emulation. You can see with the setting that I use here, I use the Nevo setting. This is an emulation of a Neve preamp, a Neve 1073. The reason that I do this, honestly, I probably didn't need to do it with this vocal because, these are Uzi's vocals, so they're probably tracked pretty well. But the reason that I do this is because a very famous vocal chain, outside of the box, is a Neve preamp and a CL1B compressor going into the box. And a lot of vocals that I work with, including my own, I don't have that equipment. So what I do is I use plugins to emulate it, and you'll see that in the next plugin that I show. But yeah, this one right here is just the Nevo setting on the Waves NLS channel. Zero drive because of the level it was recorded at. It's just literally click Nevo, and then you got the simulation of a Neve preamp. So we can hear that, what it sounds like.
I don't really care if you cry. I don't really shouldn't ever lie. Should've saw the way.
And then, like I said, what I like to do after that is to go into the CL1B emulation compressor. In this case, I'm using the one from SoftTube. It's the Tube Tech Mark II. The settings that I use, these I got from Tizio, who is a famous engineer known for Chris Brown. Attack at 5 o'clock, attack at 12 o'clock at 5. Release at 2 o'clock, which is 6. I got the ratio at 2:1, just light compression. And the threshold, and output gain, I'll adjust accordingly based on the signal. But really what I'm looking for here is to get like 3 decibels of gain reduction, maybe 5 at the absolute most. Once again, this is supposed to be simulating, analog units in the recording process. And usually at this part of the recording, you wouldn't want to be printing too much compression into that because then it's going to be baked into the recording permanently. So, less is more at this stage. So yeah, I'm looking for like 3 to 5 decibels of gain reduction at the most. And you can see there,
I don't really care if you cry.
it's just like tapping like 3 to 5. So that's that. Then what I like to do is, like I said, I like to pretend that was in the analog domain and that was going into my recording. So then the first, actual mixing thing I'll do is Autotune. Uzi's vocals are heavily auto-tuned here. That's how you get that sound. The settings that you use aren't that important. You can do more auto-tune or less auto-tune depending. I just found that these settings with the specific auto-tune plugin I use was the closest to the recording. But it's not that important. Just know that retune speed is the one that's going to give you that heavy tuning, and then the other settings are kind of secondary to fine tune it. But make sure that you are setting your key and scale accordingly to the song or to whatever one you want to use. That's very important and often overlooked. If you set it to the wrong key and scale, it doesn't matter what you do or how you sing, it's not going to sound right. In this case here, we got B minor. That's what the instrumental was. So I threw that in B minor. I used the retune speed of 9, a flex tune of 8 to smooth out a little, and 5 humanize, which probably wasn't needed, but that's how I got the sound.
I don't really care if you cry. I don't really shouldn't have a lie.
Alright, next up, I got the EQ. I use the FabFilter Pro Q3 parametric EQ. You can use any EQ you want. I really went crazy with this one here. There is one band that I did dynamic EQ, but if you don't have an EQ with the dynamic function, it wasn't, that essential to the sound. But I used one here to get it what I wanted. So his vocals here were very, very high passed or low cut. Yeah, they're very high passed. There was no low end in the vocals at all. In this case here, I went up to like 346, 347. I removed everything below like 350 with a 12 dB per octave slope. So that's very extreme. His vocals were very thin. So I did that. I also took out about 2.5 decibels at 350 just to remove a little bit more low end to get the sound. I took out about, 2-3 decibels at 450. I also put a low shelf in there to remove even more low frequencies. I took out 5.5 decibels at like 515. That was how I was getting that thin, not papery, but really thin vocal sound. In addition to the low cut filter, that helped to get the sound that he used on this EQ and that he uses a lot. And then right here, I got like 1.76 decibels removed at 741 hertz. And I actually saw a video, I don't remember where, but it was with one of Uzi's engineers saying that this range right here is the nasally range. And it's very important in Uzi's vocal because he has that nasally delivery that you have to be careful to control it because it can get overbearing. But if you cut too much out, that's where the body of the vocal is, the energy. So I was very, careful of that to remove a little, but I didn't want to remove too much. If I took more out, it might have sounded a little more pleasant, but it lost the energy of the vocal and it lost the presence and it didn't cut through the mix anymore. So I found that to work right there for this song. Then at like 1700, I took out like 1.3 decibels. It was just a little bit harsh. I don't like 1.8K in vocals a lot of times. Right at like 2700, I took out a dB and a half. Once again, that was just harshness. Nothing extreme. And then 3800, I took out 1.3 decibels. Harshness once again. I find myself doing this with a lot of vocals. It always depends, but, don't always do the same thing. But I find that happening a lot. And then I did a 3 decibel shelf to the top end at like 10.3K. I don't think I did this at first. I think this was an afterthought. I went back to get the brightness that was from the vocal. But that's just how I did it. So I got some brightness there. But yeah, so I did that. Sorry, my dog is here. I'm petting my dog. So let's hear what that sounds like.
I don't really care if you cry. I don't really shouldn't have a lie. Should've saw the way she looked.
So yeah, that's how you get like the tone of the vocal and fix a lot of the problems. Then next thing I do is compression. In this case, I use the Llif3. I use this compressor all the time, especially on vocals. On the bluey setting, I got a ratio 4:1, release at 7, attack at 3. Sorry, my dog's getting into something. And the input and output doesn't matter. That's context dependent on the source of the vocal. So don't copy that exactly unless you're working with the same recording. But you can see it's pinning the compressor pretty hard. I'm doing pretty heavy compression, but this compressor on vocals is built for that.
I don't really care if you cry. I don't really shouldn't have a lie. Should've saw the way she looked me in my eyes. She said, baby, I am not a...
Next thing, another compressor. I like to use multiple compressors. You're going to see that throughout. I use the RVox. It gives the vocal a lot of body and grit. It's a great compressor from Waves for that purpose. You can see I didn't use the gate at all, but I did 8.5 on the compression, and then I used the gain to pull the gain down a little bit, in this case 4.8 decibels. That was just to kind of level match before and after. It's not needed, but in terms of gain staging and level matching, I like to do that so I can hear it before and after and know what I'm doing with the compressor. So you can see I got quite a bit of compression from this.
I don't really care if you cry. I don't really shouldn't have lied. Should've.
Alright, cool. Next thing I did, a little bit of excitement, some saturation in the upper mids. I use Fresh Air from Slate Digital. This plugin's free. If you don't have this plugin, man, free. This is like my favorite plugin. This is how I get brightness in so many vocals. I usually like to use the high air knob as well. Usually a little bit less than the mid air, but in this case, even on one, the high air was too much, too sibilant and sizzly, so I wasn't able to use it, unfortunately, but hey, that's okay. I used the mid air to get at 17%, pretty excessive, but it sounded good. It's how I got the sound that the original mix had. And then you can see on the trim, I turned it down, 0.6 decibels. That's because this plugin kind of boosts the level a little bit, and once again, I want a gain stage so I can hear the difference.
I don't really care if you cry. I don't really shouldn't have lied. Should've saw the way she looked.
So if you ask me, that was a very important step in this mixing this vocal. That's really what gave it the flavor. In my opinion, it was the EQ, obviously the Autotune, and then that one plugin, Fresh Air, that really got the tone. Those were like the three biggest things. Everything else was pretty subtle. But yeah, let's keep it moving. So then the S's are harsh, obviously, especially after using Fresh Air. So I used FabFilter Pro DS. You know, any de-esser will work. I just reached for this one. It's one of my favorites. The threshold, I had negative 23.8, but once again, that's context dependent. That's not necessarily important. I had the range set to 8.5, which is basically like the maximum amount of de-essing that's going to be done. I was targeting between 7K and 13K on this vocal. I have it split band all around setting so that it actually uses the band. And I was using the look ahead function at exactly 10 milliseconds to really tame the S's at the right speed that I wanted them to.
I don't really care if you cry. I don't really shouldn't have lied. Should've saw the way she
Nothing
looked.
crazy, nothing exciting, just a de-esser. Then we got more saturation. And the reason I did the de-esser before the saturation is because I wanted to fix that harshness in the sibilant area before I put more saturation on it. So then I went to my saturator. I use FabFilter Saturn 2. Classic saturation plugin. Really love it. I use the clean tape setting. It is a multi-band saturator, but I didn't use the bands. I just whole frequency spectrum. I put the drive at like 29%. I use the dynamic feature to compress it a little bit and to kind of even out the level at which it was saturating different sources. I did that at like 0.243, whatever. And then I dialed it back on the mix knob a little bit, like 70%. Still pretty excessive in my opinion, but it's what it needed. And then to compensate for all of that, I had to turn the overall gain down in the plugin like 1.6 decibels.
I don't really care if you cry. I don't really shouldn't have lied. Should've saw the way she looked me in my eyes. She said,
all right, now we're really shaping up here. Once again, I said I like to use compressors and stages. So here I use the Waves MV2 compressor, and I use the low levels setting because it's sort of upward compression. So a typical compressor will take the loudest parts and compress them down. This is kind of doing it in reverse, or the inverse of that. It's taking the quietest parts and kind of pushing them up towards the body of the signal, and this is so I can get some nuance out of the vocal and the low levels to bring them up and just squeeze the vocal a little more. Nothing too crazy. I did 3.3 on the low level, and then I turned the output down a little bit to compensate for it to kind of get it in the same level.
I don't really care if you cry. I don't really shouldn't have lied. Should've saw the way she looked me in my eyes.
Alright, cool. Then I used the Gem Dopamine, which I just got this recently. I learned this from Baines, who is Young Thug's engineer. I was watching a tutorial on, mixing like Young Thug, and I saw him using this plugin, and I tried it, and yeah, it's been on probably every vocal since then, definitely for rap. It adds brightness. Maybe I'll do a video reviewing this plugin, but it's basically like an exciter, but not really. But it adds brightness. So I have it on the 361 setting. Unfortunately, they don't show values, so you can just kind of look. I got the dry all the way up because I wanted the dry signal because it's not on a send. The wet is up pretty high. It's like, pretty high, honestly. And then I used a little bit of the compression, and then I turned the level down a little just to match the before and after.
I don't really care if you cry. I don't really shouldn't have lied. Should've saw the way she looked me in my eyes. She said, baby, I am not afraid to.
gonna go, I made a bus for my vocals to group them, even though it's only one vocal, basically just to give myself a way to add more plugins to the chain. This is a pretty, you know, heavy, extensive chain, but that's the sound that it is. It's a processed vocal, and, you know, for the most part, I'm being very subtle at each stage. And, you know, so that's why there's so many plugins. They're just each doing a little bit to add up to the sound that I want. Not every vocal is like this, and you don't always need to do this much processing, but sometimes you do, you know? There's no rules. So next thing I did, another compressor. Here I used the Waves R compressor. Threshold I pulled down just to be tapping it a little bit. I used the ratio 2.4 in this case. I like to use like a ratio around 2 when I'm doing at this. I'm kind of just hugging the vocal, and I'm getting the overall tone shaping here. Or I should say more so, it's like I'm shaping the envelope of the vocal here. I'm really trying to get it to, you know, the right attack and release to really fit into the beat the way that I want it to. Especially in this case when we're working with a 2-track, we don't have the track out stems. So the attack 13.6, release 73.5. I have it on ARC, opto, and warm. And then I gave it a little bit of gain to, you know, compensate for the compression we did to balance it out.
I don't really care if you cry. I don't really shouldn't have lied. Should've saw the way she looked me in my eyes. She said, baby, I am not a...
Squeeze the vocal and to really fit it into the beat. Now I use another EQ, Fab Filter Pro Q3 once again. Very subtle here. Just, you know, after adding all the processing after our initial EQ and my ears adjusting, and, you know, I could have probably done this beforehand, but I you know, whatever. But yeah, between the processing and me hearing it differently now, I realized I needed to do some further EQing. I need to remove some of the low mids and boost a little bit of the highs. And you can see that they're dynamic bands, and I'll explain why. So the first cut here, I did around 350 hertz. And what I did was, you know, I took out a little bit, and then I took out even more dynamically. So it was taking out a little bit, but as that energy was building up there, it would take out even more accordingly. Just really trying to pocket the vocal and the beat at this part and really, really craft the sound that I wanted. And then around 935, I took out 0.4 decibels. And then added a little bit more, like another dB of dynamic once again, so that it removed some of that, you know, mid-ranginess that I didn't like. But as it got excessive, it took out even more to taste. And then around 6K, you know, I just boosted a little bit because it needed some brightness, but then it was too harsh. So what I did was I had it boost a little bit of that brightness, but then when there was an excessive amount, it would pull it back down, and I did it about the same amount. So I gave it a boost, but then when there was too much, it would turn it back down to baseline, so to speak, sort of where it was before we did the boost. So I was able to get some brightness, but when there was too much, it was not there.
I don't really care if you cry. I don't really shouldn't have lied. Should've saw the way she looked me in my...
And that's very subtle. You might not have heard that. Like, once again, it was supposed to be subtle. Then now I'm doing some flavor EQ, some analog emulation EQ to boost. I used from Plugin Alliance, I used the Mag EQ4. Just used the air band at 20K, and I boosted 3 dBs. Just giving 3 dBs at 20K, just that top end brightness. And then to compensate for it, I just turned down by 0.4 dBs.
I don't really care if you cry. I don't really shouldn't have lied. Should've saw the way she looked me in my eyes.
Alright, next up, this isn't usually where I guess you would put this plugin in the chain, but this is the Llif3 73 from Waves, which I believe is also a 1073 emulation. Just giving the vocal some saturation, a little bit of texture, very subtly though. What I do, I turn the input down a little bit because at the level that it was already gain stage at, it was giving it too much saturation, even baseline. So I turned the input down, and then to compensate for it, I turned the output up. I linked them at the bottom. I have that set to my default, just 3.9 dB. And then looks like I didn't boost any highs, but around 7.2K in the mids, I just like 0.1, just like a little bit of a boost there. It just needed that to cut through.
I don't really care if you cry. I don't really shouldn't have lied. Should've saw the way she looked me in my eyes. She said, baby.
Alright, and then the last plugin on our chain here is another compressor. It's an LA two-way. In this case, I use the Overloud Gem Comp LA. It's just an LA 2A emulation. The stock Logic one would work. The Waves LA 2A would work. I just got this one recently. I've really been liking the sound of it. It's doing like half a dB of gain reduction. It's just hugging the vocal, and I even turned the harmonic distortion down from the default because it was already kind of sitting where I wanted. It's just giving a little flavor, a little character, a little life to the vocal, and really just hugging it that one final time and seating it into the instrumental the way that I wanted it to.
I don't really care if you cry. I don't really shouldn't have lied. Should've saw the way she looked me in my eye.
Alright, cool. Now we're gonna go to my sends for effects and parallel processing. So you can see here I got this send at -14.8. What this is the plugin alliance. It's the Kive X stressor, a compressor that I'm running in parallel. It is a distressor emulator. These compressors sound really good in parallel. So I'm just doing some parallel compression to get some flavor, some characteristic, give the vocal some life, give it some body, let it cut through more, but without, you know, doing any more standard compression to really squish the vocal. So best of both worlds. I got it on the distortion type is 3. Adding a lot of warmth. You can look at the settings I'm using. I think I use 5 o'clock all across. Not super important which plugin you use or if you copy these exact settings, but just know I'm doing some parallel compression here. And yeah, let's hear that.
I don't really care if you cry. I don't really shouldn't have lied. Should've saw the way she looked.
Alright, cool. Next up, I got a send turned down pretty low. It's at -34.5. I got a room reverb. In this case, I use the Man American reverb from Waves on the room setting. I've been really big on room reverbs lately to give the vocal a little texture and kind of a tone that I want. I almost kind of use it as a way to like EQ a vocal without EQing it. So I can add some brightness or some body to the vocal without actually doing it to the signal. I do it to a short room reverb, but it also kind of gives the vocal a realistic feel and makes it feel real and kind of seats it in the instrumental. So I use the room medium setting. I gave it like 5 pre-delay. I like to do just a little pre-delay, just so that it doesn't kind of wash out my transients, but nothing crazy. I used a little compression, 10.4. You can see I boosted the highs a little bit, boosted the mids a little bit, and boosted the lows a little bit, which is kind of redundant, but you know, this is what happens when you're working fast in real time. This is the things that kind of happen. But yeah, let's leave that.
I don't really care if you cry. I don't really shouldn't have lied. Should've saw.
Alright, cool. Nothing crazy. Then we got another send at -19.8, pretty low. Parallel compression again. In this case, I'm using the Waves CLA 76 again to do some parallel compression. I put the input all the way up so that it's driving it hard, and then I turn the output all the way down, except for like not at infinity, because then I'm pretty sure it'll be muted. I put it just before all the way down, but that's not important. That's dependent on the context. But the attack I do at 1, and the release I do at 7. When I do parallel compression with my 76, you can even see I got myself a preset that I made there. And then the ratio I just do all. Just pinning it, getting some tone from the compressor. You can ignore this plugin. I didn't do anything with the gain plugin, but I'm just really nuking this compressor to get the tone. And then I'm doing that in parallel so I can blend it in. So I'm not squashing my vocal, but I'm squeezing the tone out of the 76, which I love.
I don't really care if you cry. I don't really shouldn't have lied. Should've saw the way she looked me in my eyes.
And this song is going to be stuck on my head for the rest of the day. I heard it so many times today. Next up, we got another send here. Pretty low, -23.3. I got a reverb, a hall reverb. In this case, I use the Waves R-verb. The reverb type, hall 1. A little bit of pre-delay, once again, to not wash out those transients. I got 4.5. The time is at 2.4 second decay. I think that was what it was by default. Size at 100, like default. I turned the diffusion up to like 80, just so I could get a more, you know, linear fall off in that reverb tail to get the sound that I wanted. Pretty dark hall reverb, not too noticeable.
I don't really care if you cry. I don't really shouldn't have lied. Should've saw the way she.
Alright, cool. That was a little flavor, a little bit of seat in the vocal. Next up, we got another send like negative 29.2. Another reverb. This case, I'm using the Waves H verb or the H reverb. I don't hear many people talk about this, but this reverb is crazy. One of my favorites. It's up there with the Valhalla for me. I love this one. But anyways, crazy presets. There's like over 200 presets. In this case, I use the warm chamber preset, which I love to thicken vocals or to make them, you know, more warm, hence the name. But yeah, I just chose that preset, and I think the only thing I changed was the pre-delay. I just gave it a little, yeah, I gave it like 16 pre-delay. Once again, I don't like to wash out my transients, just a little bit of pre-delay. And I think that's all I changed. I'll open up all the settings here so you can look if you want to copy them, but I'm pretty sure they're just from the preset. Let's hear that.
I don't really care if you cry. I don't really shouldn't have lied. Should've saw away.
This was the final thing in the whole process, and also something that was integral to the sound, and that was that delay or that echo that you hear. I have it at negative 9.3. I use the Waves H delay, but any echo or delay plugin will do. Quarter note delay in this case, if you got the tempo set to 155, which it was. I use the lo-fi button. I use this pretty much every time I use the H delay. I just like to separate it from the lead vocal, make it sound more distant, makes it pocket itself in pretty nice. Quarter note delay 155. I used the filters. I removed everything below 475, just removing the lows, removed a little bit of the highs above like 14.5K, just to kind of leave just the mid-range so that it's not super bright and sibilant or super low and boomy. You don't really need that in your delays most of the time. It was a pretty short delay. It was like 2 or 3 repetitions, so my feedback's only on 15. Yeah, let's hear that.
I don't really care if you cry.
And then also what I did on this send to further affect the delays, they were spread out really wide. I haven't used this plugin in a while, but it does the job. It's the Logic stock stereo spreader. I was just spreading out the upper frequencies, basically the frequencies that were in the delay anyways. So I just spread them out to make them super wide. You can copy the settings if you want, but it's not important. It was just to make the vocal, or to make the delay wider. And then I put a filter on it at like 95% just to make it sound more distant and filtered in relation to the lead vocal, because they're a little bit too clear. Kind of just a quick and easy way to do it. It was a stock Logic plugin. And then what I did was I sidechained this to the lead vocal so that when the lead vocal is prominent, the echoes are getting ducked and turned down and taking a back seat. And then in between the bars or in between the lead vocal, it's you know, the compressor is releasing and letting the echo come through. You can hear that effect in the lead vocal. They might have automated it, but this is just a quicker and faster way to do a similar thing. If you want to really get precise, you can automate your delay sends instead. But yeah, so you can just see the settings that I use here. Sidechain it to the lead vocal. I turned off the auto gain. I don't want to do that, but then I did turn it up a little bit to compensate. Not important. I use a 5.6 to 1 ratio. I had the threshold at negative 37, but you know, that's context dependent. 0.7 knee, which I didn't touch. I used a fast attack and a medium, pretty slowish release. It was just the way that I was just going off feel, and that's how I got it to pocket in the beat into the sidechain to do what I wanted, where it would bloom in between the lines. So let's hear that now. Oh yeah, and I also took that delay send and sent it to my hall reverb just to make them have a little bit of reverb, a little bit of sauce, and also to kind of put them in the background even more. All right, with all of that, now let's hear the final vocal.
I don't really care if you cry. I don't really shouldn't have lied. Should've saw the way she looked me in my eyes. She said, baby, I am not.
Alright, cool. Let's listen to it once again with nothing but before.
I don't really care if you cry. I don't really shouldn't have lied. Should've saw the way she looked me in my eyes. She said, baby.
Alright, now we'll turn everything back on one more time to hear the final product, what we did.
I don't really care if you cry. I don't really shouldn't have lied. Should've saw the way she looked me in my eyes. She said, baby.
Alright, now I'll show you the original.
I don't really care if you cry.
A being back and forth.
I should've saw the way she looked me in my eyes. She said, baby, I am not afraid to.
Yeah, so there you have it. That is the Lil Uzi Vert EXO Tour Life vocal tutorial. Pretty complex vocal chain. Thin vocal, nice and auto-tune, but it sounds cool. So if you want that effect or something similar, take some of these strategies, you know, use it, don't use this, use that, don't, whatever you want to do. But anyways, I hope you learned something. My name is Inswain with Inswain Audio. And also, if you want to buy a Lil Uzi Vert template, I have those at the link in the description on my website. I have a Lil Uzi Vert template for sale if you don't want to go through all that process of doing this. And it is with stock plugins, so you don't need to own all of these plugins that I use. So if you want a stock version of this to sound like Lil Uzi Vert, check out the link in my description. Get that preset. I also have other preset packs like Drake, Young Thug, Travis Scott. So feel free to check those out and make some hits. Anyways, my name is Inswain with Inswain Audio. Until the next one, y'all. Peace.